Just got this laser and it's taking up a ton of space on my workbench. So I think I'm gonna build a dedicated laser cart for it. Here's the deal. I want this cart to be simple and easy to upgrade. I also don't want it to cost a fortune because I'd rather buy a new car than another sheet of plywood. Luckily, I found an awesome solution. Using these metal fittings, we can build a sturdy metal frame using low-cost EMT conduit. And we can build it faster, cheaper, and with fewer tools than building the cabinet out of plywood, making this the perfect solution for small shops and beginning woodworkers. Let's get started. The fittings I'm using for this project are made by a company called MakerPipe. On this T-fitting here, we can see how there's an interlocking puzzle piece design that locks together when the fitting is clamped onto the conduit. The fittings are designed so that you can easily adjust your project as needed, or even add fittings later on. I'll be using fittings for 3/4 inch EMT conduit, but they make adapters and fittings for 1/2 inch and even 1 inch EMT conduit, so be sure to check those out. I always like to plan out my projects ahead of time. Maybe I'm scared of failure, or maybe it's an engineering thing. I'm not really sure. MakerPipe sells these cool little kits where you can build a small version of your project using these 3D printed fittings and some coffee stir sticks. This is really helpful for understanding the look and the feel of your project before cutting any metal conduit, and allows you to iterate and improve on the design until it's exactly what you want. They also provide all the files to print your own fittings, so you could even design the entire project in Fusion 360 first if you wanted. Now that I have my plan written down in my woodworker's notebook, it's time to start cutting some conduit. Cutting EMT conduit is really simple, and all we really need is a simple pipe cutter just like this one. All the fittings are designed so that the end of each pipe is 2 inches from the outside of the frame. So in order to figure out how long each piece of pipe needs to be for our project, all we need is the size of the frame. In this case, I want my frame to be 24 inches wide. And since this particular component will have a fitting on each end of the pipe, we'll subtract 4 inches from the overall length, leaving us with a 20-inch piece of pipe. All right, so I've got all my pipe cut to length, and I even pre-assembled some of my 90-degree fittings. These go together really easily. It's just a bolt and a nut that holds it together. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this assembled. This frame is like super strong and rock solid. I'm really happy with how these fittings are going together. Now the next thing I want to do is I want this to have wheels. Now MakerPipe sells wheels, but I totally forgot to order some ahead of time. So what I just did is I bought some casters with a stud, and then I 3D printed this little piece here that will fit over the caster, and then we will hammer them into the frame. All right, I've got the frame done, I've got the wheels mounted, but I realized I made a huge mistake. I wanted this to be a 24-inch by 26-inch frame, and I told you that to measure your conduit, you needed to take the width of your frame and subtract 4 inches. I didn't do that. I cut these at 24 and 26 inches, so my frame is 4 inches longer and 4 inches wider than it should have been. But that's actually what makes MakerPipe really cool. All I have to do to fix this problem is loosen up some of the fittings, cut the tubes down by 2 inches, and put it back together. No big deal. If this was a plywood project, I'd probably just burn it. For the top and the shelves, I went with some pre-finished birch plywood. I really like using pre-finished plywood because it's got a super hard, durable finish that's great for shop projects. I'm using a table saw to cut down my plywood, but if you don't have a table saw, that's no problem. Most home centers like Home Depot and Lowe's will gladly cut down plywood to any size you need for your project. In order to attach the shelves, I use these one-hole clips that are typically made for mounting conduit to a wall or something. These clips can be used in a couple of different ways. For example, if you want your top to overhang the frame, attach the clip from the bottom and then use a screw to hold everything in place. The other way is to attach the clip from the top of the conduit frame and then set your shelf or top inside of the frame on top of the clip. The benefit of attaching the clips this way is that you get a nice flush top, and if you wanted to remove the top, it's really easy. All you need to do is lift it off and it unsnaps. This allowed me to move the top of my cart to the very bottom shelf and then just install a new top in place of the first one. This was a lot easier than trying to attach screws to the bottom of a shelf that's only a few inches above the ground. Really quick, let's talk about the cost of this project. First off, MakerPipe did send me the fittings for free, but obviously I'm going to include those in the retail price for my calculations. Overall, the project is only slightly cheaper than if I had built the cart using plywood. But before I show you the final numbers, I think it's worth noting that building with MakerPipe doesn't require any big fancy woodworking tools. In fact, all you really need is a cheap pipe cutter and an Allen wrench. So I think it's worth a lot, especially if you're new to making or woodworking and have a limited set of tools available. Alright, in terms of numbers, I estimate that a plywood version of this cart would cost about $212 based on 2 sheets of plywood and some casters. There would also be a lot of scrap left over, but it's kind of a weird shape, so it depends how much value you want to place on that scrap. The MakerPipe version came out to $222, which includes all the fittings, the conduit, the clips, and the casters needed for the project. Wait, isn't that more? Yes, but you could use MDF or even particle board for the shelves, since they aren't structural, which would easily cut out $40 to $50. And you'd still have a 4x4 foot scrap left over, which is pretty useful. I know this basically means that they cost the same, but what is really interesting is that I could have built this cart twice as big and the cost would have been about the same price, whereas the price of the plywood cart would have almost doubled. Just something to consider. All right, let's get back to the build. Now this project isn't quite done yet. I want to cover up the sides just to give it a more buttoned up look. To do that, I painted some hardboard black and then cut it down on the table saw. Then I used my 3D printer to 3D print these cool little clips that would attach the hardboard right to the conduit. I'll have a link to the 3D models for these clips in the description down below, so be sure to check that out. I'm really excited to have a dedicated place for my laser as well as some extra storage for the shop. If you're thinking about building some more storage cabinets for your shop, I've got a video queued up for you right over here, all about tips and tricks that you're definitely gonna like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.